Jasmin hadn't meant to come home early. Not really. But the ER had been slow for a Tuesday night, and her supervisor had offered to let her leave at midnight instead of her usual 2 a.m. shift end. She'd said yes without thinking, grateful for the chance to sleep in her own bed for once, to maybe catch up on the laundry that had been piling up for weeks. The apartment was dark when she unlocked the door at 12:47 a.m. Too dark. The hallway light she always left on was off, and something in her stomach twisted before her brain could catch up. She told herself she'd forgotten to flip the switch that morning. Told herself she was being paranoid, that 3 months of looking over her shoulder had finally gotten to her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. She dropped her keys on the entry table and walked toward her bedroom, exhaustion making her movements slow and heavy. That's when she saw him. Connor stood in her bedroom doorway, backlit by the lamp on her nightstand. For a moment, her mind couldn't process it, couldn't reconcile the familiar shape of him with the impossibility of his presence. Then she saw what surrounded him. Photographs covering her bed. Dozens of them, printed on glossy paper, images of her leaving work, grocery shopping, walking to her car. Her work schedule, printed from the hospital's internal system, pinned to her wall with thumbtacks. A shoebox filled with things she'd thought she'd lost, a hair tie, a chapstick, her favorite pen. "Jazz," he said softly, like they were continuing a conversation from earlier that day. "We need to talk." She didn't remember grabbing her purse. Didn't remember her feet moving, carrying her back through the apartment, her fingers fumbling with the deadbolt. She heard him call her name, heard his footsteps behind her, but she was already out the door, running down the hallway in her scrubs and sneakers, her heart a drum in her ears. Her car sat in the parking lot like salvation. She locked the doors the second she was inside, hands shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. She drove, didn't know where, just away, until she found herself in the parking lot of a closed grocery store 3 miles from her apartment, sodium lights casting everything in sick yellow. The tears came then, hot and choking. She fumbled for her phone, scrolling through contacts with trembling fingers until she found it. The post-it note Simone had forced into her hand 2 weeks ago, with the crisis hotline number scribbled in purple pen. She'd laughed it off then, told Simone she was being dramatic. She wasn't laughing now. The numbers blurred as she tried to focus. She typed them in carefully, but her fingers slipped on the second-to-last digit. She didn't notice. She just pressed call and held the phone to her ear, sobbing into the silence while it rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice. Deep. Male. Confused. "This is a private line. Who is this?" She should have hung up. Should have checked the number and tried again. But something in his voice, the steadiness of it, the way it cut through her panic like a hand on her shoulder, made her break completely. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't know what to do. He was in my apartment." There was a pause, brief but weighted. Then the voice again, different now. Present. Real. "Okay. I'm here. Tell me where you are. Are you safe right now?" And just like that, Jasmin Rivera, who had spent 3 months holding herself together with duct tape and denial, fell apart in the front seat of her Honda Civic while a stranger on the wrong number kept her from drowning. His name was Dominic. That was all he gave her and all she asked for. They existed in a suspended bubble where context didn't matter, where the only thing that mattered was the sound of his voice, keeping her tethered to something solid. He kept her talking. Not about Connor. Not about the photographs or the violation or the 3 months of looking over her shoulder. Instead, he asked about her work, what it was like being an ER nurse, whether the hospital cafeteria coffee was as terrible as he'd heard. She found herself telling him about Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd brought her homemade tamales last week after Jasmin saved her grandson's life during a car accident. About the way some nights felt like swimming through concrete, and other nights felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "You save people," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "I try to," she answered. "Sometimes it works." The sky began to lighten at the edges, purple bleeding into navy bleeding into the dusty blue of almost morning. Jasmin realized with a start that they'd been talking for hours. She checked the time, 6:23 a.m. For hours. She'd been on the phone with a stranger for 4 hours. "I need you to do something for me," Dominic said, and there was something different in his tone now. Purposeful. There's a hotel about 2 miles from where you are. The Morrison. Drive there now. When you arrive, tell them you're checking in under reservation haze. The room is already paid for. No questions. I can't. Yes, you can. You need somewhere safe to sleep. Somewhere he doesn't know about. Just for today. Just to breathe. She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him she didn't take charity from strangers, that she could handle this herself. But exhaustion had sanded her down to something raw and honest, and the truth was she had nowhere else to go. Why are you helping me? She asked, her voice small. The pause was longer this time. When he spoke, it was quiet, threaded through with something that sounded like old pain. Because someone should have answered when my sister needed help. She didn't ask what he meant. Somehow, she understood that this wasn't the time. The Morrison Hotel was nicer than anywhere she'd stayed in years. The woman at the front desk asked no questions, just handed her a key card and directed her to the elevator. The room was on the 4th floor, clean and anonymous, with blackout curtains and silence so complete it made her ears ring. Before she collapsed onto the bed, she sent one text to the number she'd misdialed. I'm inside. Safe. Thank you. His reply came immediately. Sleep. I'll check on you later. She did. For the first time in 3 months, Jasmin slept without dreaming. When Jasmin woke, the room was dark and she didn't know where she was. Her heart kicked into panic mode before memory reassembled itself. The hotel, the stranger, the phone call that had lasted until dawn. She fumbled for her phone on the nightstand. 2:17 p.m. She'd slept for almost 8 hours straight. 17 missed calls from Simone. For voicemails, a string of increasingly frantic texts. Where are you, Jazz? Please answer your phone. I'm calling the police if I don't hear from you in 30 minutes. And one message from an unsaved number. Did you sleep? She texted Simone first, a quick explanation that she was safe, that she'd explain everything soon. Then she stared at Dominic's message for a long moment before typing back. I did. Thank you again. 3 dots appeared immediately. I'm glad. How are you feeling? The truth was she didn't know. Numb. Hollowed out. Grateful and violated and exhausted all at once. Like I need my best friend, she typed. Then call her. I'll be here if you need anything. Simone arrived at the hotel 2 hours later with an overnight bag, Chinese takeout, and the kind of fierce protective energy that made Jasmin's chest ache with relief. She took one look at Jasmin's face and pulled her into a hug that lasted a full minute. Tell me everything, Simone said. So she did. The apartment. Connor. The photographs. The stranger who'd talked her through the worst night of her life. She left out his name, called him someone who helped. And Simone's eyes narrowed with immediate suspicion, but she didn't push. Not yet. We're going to the police, Simone said. Right now? Before you talk yourself out of it. The police station was fluorescent lights and bad coffee, and a detective who looked at Jasmin with tired eyes and took her statement with mechanical efficiency. When she was done, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Without physical violence, there's not much we can do immediately. We can file a report, and you can request a restraining order, but what? Simone interjected sharply. But stalking cases are difficult. Proving intent, establishing a pattern, it takes time. Time she didn't have. Time Connor had already stolen from her. Back at the hotel that evening, Jasmin sat on the edge of the bed and texted Dominic. The police say they can't help. Not really. His response came fast, and she imagined she could feel the anger in it. I'm sorry. That's not right. No, it's not. She stared at the screen, at this person she'd never met, but who had somehow become the only steady thing in her spiral. Can we talk tonight? On the phone? Of course, he wrote. I'll call you at 9. And just like that, Jasmin felt something in her chest unclench. She wasn't alone in this. She had Simone. She had her own strength. And she had a stranger's voice in the dark, promising to keep her company through whatever came next. Somewhere across the city, in a penthouse office with floor-to-ceiling windows, Dominic Hayes stared at his phone and felt something shift. He'd answered because of Lily. Because he'd failed her. Because some part of him still believed he could rewrite that night if he just tried hard enough. But this woman he'd never met, whose voice had cracked with exhaustion and fear and stubborn resilience. This wasn't about Lily anymore. This was about Jasmin. And he couldn't explain why that terrified him more than anything had in 7 years. 2 weeks slipped by in a rhythm Jasmin hadn't expected. She moved into Simone's spare room, a space that smelled like lavender and old books, with a futon that hurt her back and a window that looked out onto a fire escape covered in potted herbs. It wasn't home, but it was safe. That had to be enough. The security system arrived on a Tuesday. Top-of-the-line equipment that Jasmin hadn't ordered, installed by professionals who said it was covered by a victim services fund she'd never heard of. Simone raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Jasmin pretended not to notice the careful way Dominic had asked about her apartment 2 days before. Pretended she didn't see the connection. They talked every night. Sometimes for hours, sometimes just 20 minutes before exhaustion pulled her under. The conversations had shifted, evolved beyond crisis into something that felt dangerously close to intimacy. He told her about building his company from nothing, about the pressure of being responsible for thousands of employees, about nights when he stood at his office window and felt the weight of all those lives pressing down on his shoulders. She told him about the teenager she'd saved last month, about performing CPR while counting compressions in her head, about the moment the girl's eyes had opened and Jasmin had felt like maybe, just maybe, she was doing something that mattered. "You are," he said quietly. "You're doing everything that matters." On her first day back at work, she felt like she was moving through water. The ER was loud and bright and overwhelming, full of people who didn't know her life had fractured 2 weeks ago. She threw herself into 12-hour shifts, found comfort in the familiar chaos of trauma bays and triage decisions and the specific kind of exhaustion that came from saving lives. Her phone buzzed during lunch break. Dominic, asking how she was holding up. She smiled at the screen like an idiot. "Who's that?" her colleague Marcus asked, grinning. "Nobody," she said too quickly. It was during her Thursday shift that the flowers arrived. A massive arrangement of white roses, expensive and perfect, delivered to the nurse's station with a card that made her stomach drop. "I'm sorry for scaring you. I just miss us." See, the supply closet was the only place she could think to go. She locked herself in among the gauze and 4 bags and surgical gloves, sinking to the floor with her back against cold metal shelving. Her breath came in sharp, painful gasps. The walls pressed in. Connor knew where she worked. Of course he did. He'd known everything. The door handle rattled. "Jazz? Open up. It's me, Simone." Thank God. She unlocked the door with shaking fingers, and Simone took one look at her face before pulling out Jasmin's phone. "I'm calling him." "Simone, don't." But she was already scrolling, already pressing the number Jasmin had been too embarrassed to save under a name. It rang twice before a male voice answered. "Jasmin." "This isn't Jasmin," Simone said, her voice sharp as broken glass. "This is her best friend. And I don't know who you are or what your deal is, but she needs you right now. So you're going to talk to her, and you're going to help her calm down. And then you and I are going to have a conversation about boundaries." She shoved the phone at Jasmin, who pressed it to her ear like a lifeline. "I'm here," Dominic said, and just like that first night, his voice cut through the panic. "Breathe with me. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 6. She breathed. He counted. Simone watched with narrowed eyes. 20 minutes later, Jasmin's hands had stopped shaking. Simone had her arms crossed, studying Jasmin's phone like it held answers to questions she hadn't asked yet. "He's helping me," Jasmin said quietly. "I can see that. What I can't see is why a stranger cares this much about someone he's never met." Jasmin didn't have an answer. She wasn't sure she wanted one. That night, Dominic's voice sounded different on the phone. Tighter. More careful. "I need to tell you something," he said. Her heart kicked. "Okay. The man you're running from. Connor Reed. He lost his job 3 days ago." Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. "How do you know that?" she asked slowly. "I looked into him. Just basic information. I wanted to make sure you were safe." It should have felt invasive. Should have set off alarm bells. But all she felt was a complicated knot of gratitude and unease, tangled together too tightly to separate. "Thank you," she said, because she meant it, even if she didn't know if she should. Dominic's penthouse office was all glass and steel, Manhattan sprawled below like a circuit board of light. James Wellington stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw tight with the kind of tension that came from watching someone you cared about cross lines you'd sworn you'd never cross. "We need to stop," James said. On Dominic's desk, 3 monitors displayed information that would make a defense attorney salivate. Facial recognition hits showing Connor Reed outside the hospital, outside Simone's apartment building, sitting in a cafe 2 blocks from where Jasmin grabbed her morning coffee. Email transcripts that Dominic had no legal right to access. Browser history that painted a picture of escalating obsession. And there, buried in Connor's recent searches, Jasmin's mother's address in Phoenix. Rental car companies. One-way flights to Arizona. He's planning something, Dominic said, his voice flat. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Then we tell the police. We send this anonymously. We do literally anything except continue to surveil a civilian without his knowledge using technology that isn't supposed to exist yet. The police won't move fast enough. That's not your call to make. Dominic's hand curled into a fist on the desk. She told me she wants to move back to her apartment. Back to the place where he broke in. Where he's been watching her for months. So tell her what we know. Give her the information and let her decide. I can't. Why not? Because she'd ask how he knew. Because she'd look at him the way James was looking at him now, like he'd become the very thing he was trying to protect her from. Because some part of him knew that what he was doing had stopped being about her safety and started being about his need to control, to fix, to rewrite the ending of a story that had already been written 7 years ago. Are you helping her? James asked quietly. Or are you trying to save Lily through her? The question landed like a punch. Dominic said nothing. His mother asked the same question 2 days later, over dinner at her brownstone in the West Village. Elena Hayes had always been perceptive, but grief had sharpened that gift into something almost supernatural. She watched her son push food around his plate, watched him check his phone 3 times in 5 minutes, and set down her wine glass with careful precision. Tell me about her. Mother, you've been different these past few weeks. Present. Almost happy. So tell me about the woman who managed what I couldn't. He did. Not everything, but enough. The wrong number. The crisis. The way her voice had cut through 7 years of careful emotional distance like it was nothing. Have you met her? Elena asked. No. Are you planning to? I don't know. Does she know who you are? No. Elena studied him for a long moment. Dominic, listen to me very carefully. Whatever you're doing to help this woman, and I can see you're doing something, make sure it's help she's actually asking for. Not the help you wish someone had given Lily. Later that night, Jasmin curled up on Simone's futon and said the thing she'd been afraid to say out loud. I think I have feelings for him. Simone looked up from her laptop. For the mystery man on the phone. His name is Dominic. Jazz, you've never even met him. I know it's crazy. But Simone, when I talk to him, I feel less alone than I've felt in years. He listens. Really listens. Not just to respond, but to understand. Or maybe, Simone said gently, you're transferring your need for safety onto the first person who made you feel protected. The words stung because they might be true. Across the city, James delivered his ultimatum standing in Dominic's office at midnight. Both of them exhausted, both of them knowing they'd reached a breaking point. Tell her the truth about what you've been doing, or I walk. I'm not watching you become this. Dominic stared at the monitors, at evidence of Connor Reed unraveling, at the digital breadcrumbs of a man losing everything and focusing all that loss on one person. I need to meet her, he said finally. Face to face. I'll tell her everything. James nodded once. Good. Do it soon. Before she finds out some other way. The bookstore cafe was the kind of place designed for quiet conversations and pretending to read. Jasmin arrived 15 minutes early and spent the time regretting every clothing choice she'd made. The navy sweater suddenly felt too casual. Her hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail, felt lazy. She'd put on mascara, then taken it off, then put it back on again. This was ridiculous. She'd talked to him for hours. She knew his voice better than she knew her own family's. But sitting here, waiting to see his face, she felt like a teenager before prom. When he walked in, she knew him immediately. Tall, dark hair that fell just slightly too long over his forehead. A face that was handsome in that careful, controlled way of someone who'd learned not to give anything away. He wore dark jeans and a gray sweater, expensive but understated, and when his eyes found hers across the cafe, something in her chest pulled tight. He crossed to her table, and she stood awkwardly, and neither of them knew whether to hug or shake hands, so they just stood there for a beat too long before both sitting down. Hi, he said, and she laughed because it was so absurdly inadequate. Hi. The conversation started stilted, both of them hyper-aware of each other's physical presence in a way that felt disorienting after weeks of just voices. But slowly, the ease returned. He ordered coffee. She got tea. They talked about everything and nothing, and she found herself noticing things. The way his jaw tensed when he was choosing words carefully, the slight scar above his left eyebrow, how his eyes weren't just brown but flecked with amber. "I need to tell you something," she said, interrupting him mid-sentence. "I Googled your number last night." He went very still. "Dominic Hayes," she continued. "Tech CEO. Cybersecurity empire. Billionaire." She said the last word like it was a curse. "You could have told me." "I know. I'm sorry. I wanted you to know me as just me, not what I am." "I get it. I do. But Dominic, there's something about this whole thing that feels." Her phone rang. "Mom," the screen said. Her mother never called during the day. "I need to take this," she said, already answering. "Mom? What's wrong?" Her mother's voice came through tight with fear. "Honey, I didn't want to scare you, but there was a man here. At the house. He said he was your fiancé. Said you'd had some kind of breakdown and he needed to find you. I told him to leave, but Jazz, he knew things. He knew about the garden, about the cat, about..." The world tilted. Jasmin's hand gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white. "When?" she managed. 20 minutes ago. I called the police, but..." Dominic's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something in his expression shifted. "Hardened. How did you know?" Jasmin asked slowly, lowering her phone. "About my mother. About Phoenix." He met her eyes, and she saw the exact moment he made the decision to stop lying. "Because I've been tracking him. Connor. For 2 weeks. I know where he goes, what he's planning. I knew he was going to do this." The noise of the cafe faded to white static. "You've been tracking him. To keep you safe. You've been surveilling someone. Without telling me. Without my permission." Her voice stayed level, but something cold and sharp edged into it. "What else, Dominic? What else have you been doing?" "Jasmin." His phone buzzed again. He looked at it, and this time when he met her eyes, there was genuine fear there. "We need to leave. Now." "Why?" "Because according to building security footage, Connor Reed is in the cafe across the street, and he's watching us." The car ride to Dominic's penthouse was silent except for the sound of tires on pavement and Jasmin's mother's voice on speaker, being talked through filing a police report in Phoenix. James Wellington drove with the kind of calm efficiency that suggested he'd done this before, and Jasmin hated that she found it comforting. The penthouse was everything she'd expected and nothing she'd prepared for. Floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look like something you could hold in your hands. Minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her annual salary. Space that echoed with expensive emptiness. "Show me," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet. "Everything. I want to see all of it." Dominic hesitated, then led her to his office. 3 monitors lit up at his touch, and there it was. Her life through Connor's eyes and Dominic's. Timestamps. Locations. Photographs taken from security cameras she'd never known existed. Connor outside the hospital. Connor at the cafe near Simone's apartment. Connor's email correspondence with rental car companies and a disturbing manifesto about soulmates and destiny. He had 2 previous restraining orders, Dominic said quietly. Both dropped when the women moved out of state. There's a pattern. He escalates. They run. He moves on to someone new. Jasmin stared at the screens, feeling something cold settle in her chest. "How long have you known this?" 2 weeks. 2 weeks. She turned to face him. "You knew he was dangerous. You knew he was planning something. And you didn't tell me. I was trying to protect you. You were trying to control me." Her voice stayed level, but something sharp edged into it. "You made decisions about my life without asking. You watched him watching me. You became exactly what I was running from. That's not fair, isn't it?" She stepped closer, and he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the betrayal cutting deeper than fear ever had. "He thinks he knows what's best for me. He thinks if he just proves how much he cares, I'll understand. Tell me, Dominic, how is what you did any different?" The words landed like a slap. James, standing by the door, said nothing, but his silence felt weighted with "I told you so." "The difference," Dominic said slowly, "is that I'm not trying to own you. I'm trying to keep you alive. But you didn't let me choose. You took my agency and decided you knew better. You just had better intentions." Before he could respond, the elevator chimed. Elena Hayes stepped out, still in her coat, her eyes finding Jasmin immediately with the kind of maternal assessment that saw everything. James called, she said simply. I thought you might need someone who isn't these two. And somehow, impossibly, Jasmin felt tears burning behind her eyes. Elena guided her to the couch, made tea that Jasmin didn't drink, and listened while Jasmin explained everything. The fear, the gratitude, the gut punch of discovering the man who'd saved her had been watching her all along. He means well, Elena said finally. But meaning well doesn't excuse crossing boundaries. I know. He's been broken since his sister disappeared, trying to fix everyone else because he couldn't fix that. Elena's eyes drifted to where Dominic stood by the windows, shoulders tight. But you're not Lily. And he needs to learn the difference between helping and controlling. Jasmin nodded, something in her chest loosening just slightly. When Elena left an hour later, Jasmin found Dominic still at the window, staring out at the city like it held answers. I'll stay tonight, she said. Because Connor is out there, and I'm not stupid. But I need space, Dominic. To think. To figure out if this, she gestured between them, is real or just trauma bonding. Guest room is yours, he said quietly. Whatever you need. 3 days of careful distance. Jasmin in the guest room with its two-soft bed and city view. Dominic maintaining respectful space, communicating mostly through James about Connor's movements, about police coordination in Phoenix, about the restraining order finally being processed with teeth behind it. She watched him when he didn't know she was looking. Saw him on work calls, saw the way he rubbed his temples when stress built up, saw him make tea at midnight and stand on the terrace like he was trying to remember how to breathe. Elena came for dinner on the third night, forcing normalcy with homemade lasagna and conversation about anything except stalkers and surveillance. Jasmin saw the way Elena looked between them, saw the hope there, and felt guilty for not knowing if she could give her what she wanted. That night, she couldn't sleep. Found herself wandering to the terrace at 2 a.m., wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the November chill. She wasn't alone. Dominic stood at the railing, hands in his pockets, looking smaller somehow than he had 3 days ago. Can't sleep either? She asked. He turned, surprise flickering across his face. Never could. Not since. Since Lily. He nodded. I was supposed to pick her up that night. From campus. But I had a meeting that ran late, and she said she'd walk. It was only 8 blocks. His voice cracked slightly. She never made it home. And I've been trying to rewrite that night ever since. Jasmin moved closer, the blanket trailing behind her. You can't save everyone, Dominic. I know. But I thought maybe I could save you. I didn't need saving. I needed support. There's a difference. I'm starting to understand that. They stood in silence, the city breathing below them. Jasmin thought about trust, about how it builds and breaks, about whether good intentions could ever justify crossed boundaries. I should have told you, Dominic said finally. About the investigation. About Connor's history. I should have given you the information and let you decide. Yes, you should have. I'm sorry. She believed him. That was the complicated part. She believed he was genuinely sorry, genuinely trying. But sorry didn't rebuild trust. Only time and changed behavior could do that. Dominic's phone buzzed. Then hers. Then his again, insistent. James's voice came through tight, with urgency. Connor's in the building. Parking garage. Security is trying to contain him, but he's headed for the stairwell. The building went into lockdown within minutes. Dominic wanted Jasmin in the panic room, but she refused with a firmness that surprised them both. I'm done hiding, she said. Done letting him control my life through fear. James coordinated with building security and NYPD while Dominic pulled up camera feeds. There, Connor in the stairwell, 8 floors down, looking disheveled and manic. Let me talk to him, Jasmin said. Absolutely not. Through the intercom. With police present. James and security right here. She met Dominic's eyes. This is my choice. Let me make it. The intercom crackled to life, and Jasmin's voice echoed through the stairwell, calm and clear. Connor, it's me. I need you to stop. His voice came back ragged. Jazz, I just want to talk. To explain. You broke into my home. You followed me. You went to my mother's house. Because I love you. Because we belong together and you won't see it. Jasmin closed her eyes, James's hand steady on her shoulder. That's not love, Connor. Love doesn't violate. It doesn't control. What you're feeling, it's obsession. And you need help. I need you. You can't have me. That relationship is over. Silence. Then, who are you with? Who's there with you? Her heart kicked, but her voice stayed level. That doesn't matter. What matters is you need to stop climbing those stairs. Police are here. This ends now one way or another. 90 minutes. That's how long the standoff lasted. With crisis negotiators coaching Jasmin through responses, with Connor alternating between pleading and rage, with Dominic forcing himself to step back and let professionals handle it. Finally, with promises of a controlled conversation and mental health evaluation, Connor descended the stairs. Jasmin watched through security footage as police took him into custody, watched him break down, crying, looking small and pathetic and still dangerous. You did good, James said quietly. Jasmin nodded, feeling nothing and everything at once. Relief. Exhaustion. A strange kind of grief for the man she'd thought Connor was before she knew what he actually was. Dominic stood apart, letting her breathe, respecting boundaries even now. And somehow that careful distance, meant more than any grand gesture could have. 3 months felt like a lifetime and no time at all. Connor was in a psychiatric facility in upstate New York, pending trial. His lawyer had pushed for an insanity defense. The prosecutor had pushed back harder. Jasmin didn't follow the case closely anymore. She'd given her statement, provided her evidence, and then she'd done something radical. She'd let it go. Not the trauma. That would take years to fully unpack, but the daily weight of it. The constant looking over her shoulder. The belief that she'd somehow caused this. Her apartment felt like hers again. New locks, new security system, sage burned in every corner at Simone's insistence. She'd rearranged the furniture, painted the bedroom a soft gray blue, replaced the mattress he'd stood over. Small acts of reclamation. She and Dominic had been dating. Actually dating. Dinners where they argued about movies. Walks through Central Park where he bought her terrible hot dogs from street vendors, and she pretended to hate them. Meeting each other's people in the slow, careful way of two adults who'd learned that rushing led to breaking. Simone had warmed to him gradually, the way ice melts in spring. They'd bonded over a shared protectiveness of Jasmin that probably should have annoyed her, but mostly made her feel loved. Elena had essentially adopted her, inviting her to family dinners and sending care packages and asking gentle questions about her mother in Phoenix. It was normal. Beautifully, terrifyingly normal. The call came on a Tuesday night while she was volunteering at the crisis hotline, a shift she'd started doing once a month, paying forward what had been given to her. The woman on the other end was young, her voice shaking, words tumbling out about an ex-boyfriend and fear and not knowing what to do. Jasmin talked her through it, gave her resources, stayed on the line until the woman's breathing steadied. When she hung up, she felt something shift in her chest, the specific kind of peace that came from turning pain into purpose. She texted Dominic, who she was supposed to meet for dinner. Volunteer shift ran late. Can we push to 9? His reply came immediately. Of course. Same place? The bookstore cafe looked different at night, softer somehow, with warm lighting and the quiet murmur of people pretending to read. Dominic was already there when she arrived, 2 cups of tea on the table. He'd remembered she'd switched from coffee after her shift work started interfering with sleep. How'd it go? He asked as she sat down. Good. Hard. Good. She wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic. A woman called. Scared. Running from someone who wouldn't let go. You helped her. I tried to. Someone helped me once. Seemed only fair to pass it along. He smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way it hadn't 3 months ago. I've been meaning to tell you something. I started seeing a therapist. Actually seeing one, not just agreeing to when my mother suggests it. Yeah. Talking about Lily. About control. About the difference between protecting people and trying to rewrite history through them. Jasmin reached across the table, lacing her fingers through his. I'm proud of you. I've been going too. Working through trust and trauma and how to let people help without feeling weak. How's that going? Better. Slowly better. They left the cafe an hour later, walking through the city as it hummed with evening energy. Jasmin's phone rang, and for just a second, a fraction of a breath, her body tensed. Then she saw it was Simone, probably asking about weekend plans, and the tension dissolved. Dominic noticed. He always noticed. You okay? She squeezed his hand, feeling the solidness of him, the present tense reality of choosing this, of being chosen. Yeah, I really am. Above them, the city lights blurred the stars, but she didn't mind. She'd found her own kind of light in the dark, had found it by accident, by wrong number, by the specific grace of broken people recognizing each other and deciding to heal side by side instead of alone. They walked into the November night, two people who'd started with crisis and were building something that looked remarkably like love. Not the desperate kind born from fear, but the steady kind built on honesty, therapy, and the daily choice to show up. The kind that lasted. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.